Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this IIRSM webinar hosted by the Northeastern Cumbria branch. We're really delighted that you have chosen to spend your lunchtime with us. And we're very excited about the session that we'll be running today, which is AI or Die. So we're going to be digging into some of the controversies around the use of AI in businesses, talking about the risks and talking about the opportunities. My name is Tama Carroll. I am a senior environmental consultant, sustainability strategist, and I'm the co-founder of iCore Systems, which is a cloud-based solution that allows organizations to audit themselves against environmental and health and safety legislation as part of their sustainability and risk management strategies. And I am delighted to be joined today by Peter Thomas, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Intuity, which is an AI-powered safety technology company that transforms how organizations manage risk and compliance. With a background in London's real estate sector and deep expertise in fire safety, including the Building Safety Act and safety cases, Peter brings unique insight into the challenges faced by asset owners and operators in an evolving regulatory landscape. At Intuity, he leads the commercial strategy to scale AI-driven solutions that streamline risk assessments, strengthen contractor management, and give leaders a clearer visibility of safety-critical data. Peter is passionate about applying technology to real-world safety problems and works across construction, facilities, and infrastructure to build safer and more resilient organizations. And for all of those skills, experience, and expertise is exactly why I couldn't be more excited to have Peter joining us today. Peter, thank you so much for your time. We're delighted to have you.
No, it's really kind. Thank you, Tama. Thanks. It's really good to be here.
Brilliant. So I think we've got a lot of things we want to chat about in this session. We are time constrained. For the audience watching us today, we highly encourage your questions. So please use the chat box to write any questions down, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. You are also encouraged to turn your camera on and speak to us. So by all means, raise your hand if you'd like to vocalize your queries. Peter, to begin the conversation, what I understand is that AI means different things to different people. So we use kind of a common word to describe actually a number of technological interventions. So from your perspective, what does AI really mean in practical terms for organizations that have to manage compliance and risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, first of all, there's this common misconception that AI is very new. AI has actually been around for a very, very long time. I actually think the term dates all the way back to the 1950s, believe it or not, but machine learning has been around for a very long time. But as some of my more learned colleagues over at Intuity have told me, it's just not very sexy. You know, it's basically like a formula that you put in an Excel spreadsheet. There's no way to make that very attractive. You can't sell it on scale. People aren't that interested in it. It's only really when LLMs came along that AI just dominated in terms of the press coverage and how much we all talk about it. So you have a number of different types of AI, and I you know, my background, by the way, safety professional, as you said. You know, I'm not sitting here trying to say that I'm some data scientist with all knowledge of all things AI, but obviously this does dominate my life now. But you know, we've gone from machine learning through to LLMs, large language models. So things like your ChatGPTs, your Copilots. And what they are is it's a language model. There's an element of randomization in there, but ultimately the system understands words, and it's learned through ingesting data. So a lot of the data that's been ingested is text off of the internet, for example. And, you know, very famously, we talk about Elon Musk's AI, Grok. And people go, well, why did he buy Twitter? And it's like, well, actually, he bought Twitter to train an AI platform. Otherwise, it makes no sense. You know, why would the guy sending rockets to the moon buy Twitter other than to get back at them for banning him or something? I don't know. I've gone off on a tangent here, but the point is, it was used to train a platform. Now, this is where some of the limitations of LLMs come in, because it depends what it's been trained on, depends on what answer it gives you. Now, if your answer you want is based off something that someone wrote on Twitter once, well, crack on, fair play to you. But if you want something more specific, you're going to have an LLM that's trained in the area that you want to know about. And I always talk about this with LLMs in terms of their limitations. And by the way, I love LLMs, right? I love ChatGPT. I use it all the time. I think it's fantastic. I love Claude, Perplexity, Google Gemini. I think they're all fantastic. And I could talk about them all day long. But if I, for example, want to test it, I want to test the knowledge of what an LLM has. If I go into ChatGPT and I say, ChatGPT, tell me about BS8214 for timber framed fire door assemblies or something, ChatGPT will give me a really solid answer on exactly what I've asked it. However, we know that that's a British standard. We know that BSI have a paywall. And we know that BSI have never granted ChatGPT or any other LLM, to my knowledge, access to that. So where's it got that information from? Well, it's got that information from trawling people's websites. And if those websites are accurate and up to date, fantastic, you've got yourself an accurate response. But if I create a website on BS8214 and I talk utter nonsense in there, and it just happens to have a bad day and scrape what I've put on there, well, then you're going to be passing duff information onto your employer or to your client. So this is where the limitations of AI come in. I think, and I hope you don't mind me going on, Tamer, just wave your hand at me if I talk too much. But I think then there's the other point. You know, there's what can AI do for me? And I think everybody thinks about this. Everybody thinks, right, what can AI do for me as a safety professional? You know, I've got this safety profession here. What can I take AI in and what can it do to make my life better? And I see this a very different way. And this links back to the AI or die title, which I have to say, you know, I messaged you and said, do we call this AI or die? It could be a bit much, right? Because for safety professionals, it is, right? It invokes a feeling of something gone wrong. You know, this is the facts of what we do in safety. You know, some people sadly lose their lives, and that's why we're here to stop that. But this saying AI or die, if I can get it out, I was having a conversation with a tech exec who advises very large boards, and he said AI or die. And I went, well, that's interesting. What's that mean? He goes, that's what all the boards at the top companies are saying, AI or die. If they don't adopt AI, their companies will fall behind in terms of efficiency, in terms of competitiveness against the competition. That's where that saying come from. And this is what I like safety professionals to think of. Don't think about what AI will do for you. Think about what AI is doing to the organization that you're working for. Because if you are working for a large organization and the board have that attitude of we must adopt AI or we're going to fall behind the competition in terms of operational output, efficiency, and all of these other metrics that the board are particularly interested in, what that means for you as a safety professional is we're going to have to run to keep up, because the pace of change within those organizations is going to be so fast that if we in safety don't adopt the same technology that the board is adopting everywhere else for sales, finance, operationals, you know, everything, all of the data analysis, right? If we don't adopt that technology, we in safety, we're going to fall behind.
Okay. It's really, really interesting. And I think it does definitely feel out in the world that it is kind of an adopt or fall behind mentality. We know this technology is coming through. We know it has immense opportunity, but we're also still kind of realistic about the limitations. So I think my key takeaway from that is really your AI, or in fact your large language model, which is probably what most of us are using and kind of broadly calling AI. Your large language model is only as effective as the quality of the data that goes into it.
Yes.
Just a little kind of side question really on that. Do you think as businesses are considering the development of AI, there are arguments kind of for and against in-house development, so developing your own private agent that you can filter that information into, or in fact using these global LLMs which have access to the whole internet but we can't necessarily control the credibility of that data.
Huge issue. It's a huge issue right now. So if I take one element, say I take something like HubSpot, a CRM. So most people will have heard of HubSpot. It's used for customer relationship management. It's used for marketing. People use it for their customer service, right? That will have AI integrated into it. I think their platform is called Breeze. I think off the top of my head, right? And I can go into that and I can ask it a question about my CRM and it will tell me, right? So that's one element where we have an already existing system and we have AI integrated into it. And I think that sort of system works really, really well for organizations because it's got the guardrails in place, right? There's already the protections in place. It's already been built by a very large organization. And it to whatever extent, by the way, I'm not pushing HubSpot. I don't work for them, don't worry. But it kind of works, right? The other element then is individuals using their own AI. So where I feel that there's a huge risk within an organization at the moment is where an individual works in whatever department and they go, well, that's fine. You've provided me HubSpot. That's my core role, right? But if I want to do something else that's not my core role, like whether it be calendar or emails, or you ask me to produce this invite, or I've been asked to do X, Y, and Z, or organize this project, and I don't have a tool for that. At the moment, the generic go-to is ChatGPT. And for many people, ChatGPT doesn't have the guardrails, right? So what you'll have is you'll have people copying and pasting emails into it. It'll have personal information, names, details, all that's gone. It'll have people dragging and dropping contracts in there and things like that and going, can you just review this? My boss has asked me to review this, please, right? And in safety, they'll be dragging risk assessments in there and method statements and construction phase plans. And you know they will do, right? This is one of my issues. If organizations don't have a formal structure in place to adopt AI, people are going to find the shortcuts and they're going to use what works for them. And I think that is a huge risk at the moment around governance. And I think it's something that we're going to see more issues come to light in the future. The other flip side to this, very briefly, is that you mentioned about developing their own systems in-house. Outrageously expensive. I genuinely think it's outrageously expensive. I think we talk about agentic AI, but it's not quite here yet. I know there's some on trial in the US. It's not as prevalent here in terms of access because of regulations in the UK, like the online safety bill, for example. I know that the where you can create your own apps, it makes you feel really good, like you've honed something and it's bespoke. But I think, from my opinion, I think it's still built on a base model of data, and that base model of data is still riddled with issues that you're never going to get rid of. So you can't truly train it on your own model. If you really wanted to train your actual own system, it would cost you an absolute arm and a leg. And the issue that people have at the moment is that systems like ChatGPT are growing at such an astonishing rate that actually by the time you built your own AI, ChatGPT would already be 10 years ahead. So I think you've kind of got this weird situation where in some respects, organizations are standing still. And in others, they're just happy to adopt what they've already got. So if you've got HubSpot, you're going to get Breeze and it works. If you've always worked on Microsoft, you'll have Copilot. If you're a Google fan, you'll have Gemini, and it's easy to tick that box. But to try and bring something else in, it's really hard at the moment.
I think I agree. And again, we can see this with, new technologies at the moment. Cost is a barrier, arguably, because we've seen this with other technologies. The more, they saturate the market, the lower that barrier comes. It does become more accessible, but we're on the precipice at the moment now, aren't we?
Yes.
I think something else you said in there that was really interesting was, in fact, the governance around it. It is more accepting that people are going to use it because it does help make certain parts of our jobs easier. But in kind of putting organizational information into a global LLM, you are forming part of that global information. So there definitely should be some, I would say, quite strict guardrails with protected data sets, which we would see through kind of cyber essentials or cybersecurity, and then GDPR and all of that. So probably just a note of caution on that front to Really think about what you filter through before you ask the question.
Yes.
Really interesting about, of course, kind of using it in the real world and, the pros and cons of keeping it in-house or using what's already available, developed by people who have lots more money and lots more capacity to focus on the development. Suppose I'm interested then of thinking about the application of LLMs and intelligence in the context of risk and compliance. I particularly am interested in regulatory compliance, the legislation that governs health, safety, and environmental management. But in that compliance management, that risk management, and I suppose also a little bit about predictive analysis. So, can you think, or in your experiences around those three core areas, any examples of what businesses are doing well, where they're actually getting value of kind of thinking about compliance and risk management through that lens of LLM and all that knowledge? Or what are the barriers that we're still coming up against? What are the limitations they might experience to adopt it effectively?
Yeah, so I went very broad on this. So I looked at, in terms of AI, where are boards pushing? And a lot of boards are pushing the things that you would expect them to: operational efficiency, where they focus their time, sales. So tools such as data enrichment for sales, hugely accessible, hugely successful. Platforms like Clay AI and, Instantly, and all of these other platforms like Reply. There are so many out there now for sales that can help with that data. It is saturated. It's an unbelievable market. And then you get in terms of the operational side, so things like footfall analysis and things like the analytics. That's quite interesting. In terms of safety, we're doing a lot with CCTV integration and that sort of multimodal element. So I don't know if I can name names of big, smaller safety companies on it. I'm quite happy to, like Protex AI. They've got the CCTV integration in AI. And that's awesome, by the way, because what you're doing is you're taking something that we didn't do originally, and then it's data that's put in their structure. So you have structured data that comes out in their structure. So it's a completely new field, which is fantastic in terms of you have an AI integration into CCTV. It tracks the things that you want it to track, and then it spits out the data for you, but it's fresh. One of the biggest challenges that we have in safety is that our data is messy. Our data is hugely unstructured, and we have, I would say, no standardized taxonomy, but we don't. We do have standardized taxonomy or language through like ISO, for example. That does give us some element of standardization, but not
Mhm.
everyone's ISO, so not everyone uses that language. What I mean by that is if you want to analyze, well, like what we do at Intuity, we analyze risk assessment. Tammy, you'll know. Every single risk assessment you look at is completely different in terms of the structure. There is no standardized way to produce a risk assessment. They are all completely different. And I'm not talking fire, Legionella, and just general safety. Those are chalk and cheese different. But even in just safety, 5 by 5 matrix, high, medium, low, red, amber, green, the HSE's 5-step process, purely qualitative block text, they are all different. So AI, in terms of what's readily available, that's a real challenge for AI, is pulling out structured data out of unstructured information. And that's one thing that we do at Intuity with the risk assessment side, but we don't do that, for example, with accidents and incidents. We don't do that with inspection reports. We don't do that with audit templates. There is a whole world of data out there in safety that we need to go at. And it's something that I am really excited about, because as the technology gets better, and it is starting to get better, you can extract more and more information. And do you know what? I was having a conversation with Elaine online the other day. I posted a post about the data that's contained within risk assessments, and she talked about we always in safety, right? We seem to have this divide. I don't know if anyone is on the call and they've noticed it, between the behavioral based safety side and the data side, right? And we're always like this fighting. I don't know why. I don't understand. It's the same job. Come on. But the point that I'm trying to make is that Elaine mentioned and said, well, actually, that's really interesting because what you could do is you could actually use like NLP to start extracting out sentiment analysis out of risk assessments. So now what that does is it gives you a quantitative insight into qualitative text, i.e., the way the person wrote the risk assessment and the way the sentence was structured, does that give you an insight into their attitude to risk and behavior? And imagine if you start going to that level of detail for a large FTSE listed construction company. How much information could you
Mhm.
start to glean from that? You know, we're not even scratching the surface of what's possible. And it's not because the technology is not there. The technology is there. It very much is. We just haven't done it yet in safety. And I think the final thing I'll say on this is every company that we work with, that we sell into, I would say 90+ % of them have like digital transformation teams, digital innovation teams. Or like most huge companies now have digital innovation teams, very large teams. I promise you, as a safety professional, safety is not the top of the list. It's just not, right? Because it's
Yeah.
really hard for us to quantify the ROI of safety. It's really hard for us to quantify the increase in operational efficiency of safety. And because of that, it's very hard then to justify a significant expense on innovation in safety because we don't have the right answers. And that's because we don't have the right data or the data isn't in the right way. And this is where I see us changing this narrative very, very quickly. I think as we start to unlock the data that's held within our information, we'll start to be able to evidence actually just how important safety is. We
Yeah.
just need to translate it into a language that the board can understand. And when they understand it, then it will start to be pushed to the top again.
It's really, really interesting. And that's what I was taking away from that. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because actually these LLMs have all the potential to be able to quantify that ROI for investment and to give us qualitative behavioral and quantitative data to look alongside each other, which would ultimately kind of strengthen the business case for further intervention, but holistically also just increase the quality of safety interventions. You know, the data should show positive progress on all of these things. But I think, you know, this is something we've learned. We've dabbled in kind of AI a little bit for our business. We've had some access to funding to be able to explore it further. And actually, it was looking under the hood and understanding the data requirements that are necessary for it. So I think if I'm looking at this from, you know, our businesses actually using AI well, it's not that the technologies is not capable, it's that we haven't yet standardized our questions, our criteria to be able to get maximum value out of that as an industry yet. I'm kind of talking all safety
Yes.
professionals broadly.
Well, Tama, like your sustainability, right? Like you're really interested in sustainability. Okay. When I started in safety, sustainability didn't exist. I'm not even that old. I don't know. There'll be people on the call that are still sitting there going, "What's sustainability?" I thought it was environmental. Like when I did my master's, I don't know, like 8 years ago. It's not even that long ago. It was environmental, right? You didn't study sustainability. So what
Mhm.
is it that's made sustainability so important? And to me, it's a mixture of legislation and reinforcement, right? Which we've always had in safety, but you've got the legislation and reinforcement. And it's the numbers. You can quantify sustainability. Like when I've seen sustainability teams, particularly in real estate, they provide hard, concrete evidence. There are outputs of CO2 or whatever it is. I don't know, carbon emissions. Like there are definite numbers that you can hang your hat on that have to be externally validated or verified by one of the big accountancy firms before you can release it to shareholders. There is data, and it's not that we always do this thing in safety, don't we? We're like, oh, the board don't care, they don't care. But it's like actually they're just speaking a different language, right? If you look at the personality types of the types of people that are on a board, they are very data driven and they're very driven individuals, right? So they just want the data and they want to know what it is now. And we, for some reason in safety, we're struggling to provide that. But I do think AI is going to help us with that in the very short term. I don't think it's going to take long now.
No, I would agree. I think what I kind of learned through sustainability was exactly that. I care about sustainability, but not every business does. And therefore, I have to put my data into a story that makes sense
Yes.
for that organization, that aligns with their priorities to get the buy-in. And actually, I think it's quite interesting because health and safety went through that journey about 35 years ago. And I think that also might be where we are with AI and LLMs. It's a bit of a behavioral change. It's a change management process at the moment, isn't it? So we've still got like the early adopters and those who are resisting it. Everyone's trying to figure out how to move it. We're learning as we go. We're failing fast. We're getting some successes, and all of that will eventually, lead, I think, in large scale adoption. It's hard to see that this isn't going to be a part of our daily existence
Yeah.
going forward. But it's about the quality of that data. Good data in is good data out. And that's kind of the fundamental principles.
Half the time in safety, I don't think we even know why we collect the data in the first place.
I
Like,
would say that's probably true in sustainability sometimes too.
you see accident reports, and I'm sure there'll be people on this webinar that are listening and they're going, yeah, that makes sense. I've been onto sites that are very modern, forward-thinking sites. They've still got an accident book in a first aid case.
Mhm.
That's where you record the accident books, is in the next to your first aid box. And maybe that's right if you're in a really small company, but if you're in a global company, I don't. I mean, that meets the minimum legal requirements from whatever that Social Security Act was, or whatever it was. But in terms of actually being able to use data in a preventative sense,
Mhm.
it's just not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it anymore. We have to change this process.
And I think that's it, actually. It's two-parted. It's the data and it's the analysis and the capacity of LLMs to analyze and come up with lots of different ways of presenting, communicating, and understanding the data is probably the sphere that I find quite exciting about this, with an
Yes.
admission that data analysis has never actually been one of my strong points. So I'm delighted that there are solutions out there.
Yes.
Brilliant. So, lots of kind of barriers still, but it seems to be a sign of the times, but lots of potential. I think it's on us, as risk management professionals to really think about what we need the answers for. So if we think about the end result, then we'll ask better questions at the beginning. That does lead me on to a slight other thought I've had about this, though, in terms probably from my own perspective, a little bit on the data analysis front. So in my career, this is something I've had to continuously learn, keep upskilled on, work a little bit harder at, because it wasn't something that came a little, entirely naturally to me. But with the tools that are available, I can now analyze data much more quickly, much more effectively, and I can read the end result. And it did occur to me at one point as I'm processing it, I am now no longer going through the learning of interpreting it. I am relying on an external provision to interpret that data for me. And there have been moments where I've kind of asked myself the question, is this making me quicker and more efficient, more reliable at my job? Or is it dumbing me down a little bit because I'm not going through that learning curve anymore? And of course, in the market, there is a big kind of overarching concern: is AI going to steal our jobs? I don't think it will, but I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. Um, I really like this thing about is AI making us dumber, because MIT have put out a couple of studies on this, and I think I commented on something on LinkedIn because MIT have put two studies out on this that say the same thing, and I'm like, it's not like they've got a vested interest in intelligence, is it? In terms of in terms of a control group, MIT is probably not reflective of the rest of the population and us mere mortals. And the way I look at this is they did a study recently where they studied they put an ECG on the brain, or studied the brain patterns, MRI, sorry, CT scan. It's one of them. I'll ask ChatGPT in a minute. Hang on. But what it did, they studied the brain activity of MIT students doing their normal work versus doing their work with ChatGPT, and they found decrease cognitive load, for want of a better word. So basically, MIT students weren't using as much as their brains using ChatGPT for the same piece of work. Okay. To me, that's like me saying, and I put this on LinkedIn a while ago, I said, that's like me saying something along the lines of, I'm going to study the impacts of cardiovascular activity on people following the NHS guidelines of 3 20-minute sessions of cardio per week. But I'm only going to ask the British Olympic team. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go, okay, actually, it's made them a little bit slower. Well, obviously, right? And that's how I sort of felt about that study. I mean, it is an interesting one though, isn't it? Does a car make us more lazy? Well, I think there's a potential that it probably does. But if you use your car to go to fell running races every weekend, then it doesn't. So it's down to you as the type of individual that you are. But just to give you an example of where I think LLMs are really powerful, and where I think LLMs can be used differently is not just to do the thing, but as a mastermind or a coach around the thing that you think you might have a problem with. And I don't know how you use LLMs, but I use them like this all the time. So what someone will do is they will ask ChatGPT a question and go, I need to put a post on LinkedIn. Can you write me a post for LinkedIn today? Cut, copy, paste, done, right? I'm using a simple example of LinkedIn. What I would do is I would go to ChatGPT and I'd say, what is it that I should be talking about on LinkedIn? And then I would think about it would come up with the subject, and then I would think about whether that's an interesting subject or not. Or you could even go one step further and go, why do I even bother to post on LinkedIn in the first place? Like,
That's what I do.
maybe
It's a
I
bit
could
like my
save my
conscience
time by doing
sometimes.
something else, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is just take a step back each time to almost like a higher level sort of strategic view and say, actually, what questions should I be asking ChatGPT in the first place? And that's really quite interesting because then you're using it like that sort of coaching style, rather than just, I've decided on the answer, can you help me put this into practice? And I remember doing this in safety and saying, I'm a safety professional with an organization of this, and this. What types of things should I be considering? And by the way, this was quite a few years ago, and it said, oh, have you thought of ROSI? And I went, what's ROSI? He goes, the return on safety investment. I was like, oh my God, ChatGPT knows more than I do already about this stuff. And that's really interesting. Like, I would never say to ChatGPT, I need to produce a risk assessment for this. Can you give me the generic hazards, please? Like, that just feels so wrong and so lazy. But to go many steps back up the chain and use it as a coach to help you perform better in your role, I think there's a lot of real value there potentially.
I must say the way I've used it has changed. So kind of the more I've considered those ethical parameters, really thinking about, my effectiveness in my job and the fact that I want to continue to grow and learn and develop. And then a teeny tiny little TEDx talk that I saw the other week where this gentleman explained how he'd essentially crafted ChatGPT over years to be his conscience. So to essentially be his sounding board whenever he had difficult decisions to make or difficult conversations and I kind of thought that's it. Actually, the opportunity there is a bit more coaching. You still
Yeah.
have to give it enough information to make sure it's about, again, what we said, where we actually began was asking the right questions to get the right answer, but to kind of sense check, or kind of validate or say, I thought this might be relevant. Is there something else that I've forgotten? So it's kind of using your brain, but adding value, which I think is
Yes.
quite the exciting part. And I would say definitely from a sustainability lens, being the sphere that I work in, sustainability is by nature a very ethical subject, and the data and the communication and all of the elements of managing that are inherently complex. So actually being able to process that through an LLM adds value to the job because it just means you can get the job done quicker. You can process those huge volumes of data. But I still always feel that ultimately, once you've done that, that interpretation and that ethical judgment is still human. And I
Yes.
think with all of the development of technology, there is still that necessity for human intervention, cooperation, and ultimate interpretation.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, we are marching through this time, but I'm going to stick with the environmental kind of sustainability lens because, again, this is something that I'm quite conscious of. And we've seen with industries that, begin to boom, they boom quite quickly, they all get very exciting. And then in about 5 years' time, we're going to realize that there's a bit of an environmental consequence from all of this activity. And what we're hearing more now is with the rise of AI and LLMs, we are seeing greater demand for data centers, and that is building them. So, losing land to build more data centers, the energy that is used in those data centers, the raw materials that are necessary, and the thing that no one really talks about is the water footprint associated with AI technologies, mostly in kind of cooling and how
Yep.
wasteful it is. From your perspective, again, thinking kind of more holistically, risk management and compliance, how do you see organizations trying to balance this digital progression with these bigger sustainability, ethical, and safety commitments that need to be met?
So AI has an environmental impact. I don't think there's any arguments with that. And by the way, have you seen anything about quantum?
No, not yet.
Oh, yeah, you're going
Shall
to
I
love
not?
that, Emma.
We'll
Holy.
all go research afterwards.
Well, it has to be really cold, right? Like really, really, really cold. In order to do whatever they need to do with the photons effectively and splitting them in order to create quantum computing. And so the energy cost is astronomical. I think I put two hats on for this, right? My one hat is, well, cars were really inefficient, like horrifically inefficient. 100 years ago, cars were awfully inefficient compared to what they are now, and what they are now compared to what they will be in another 100 years' time, if they're even still around. There'll be again chalk and cheese difference in terms of the level of efficiency and the impact. Um, so I see where we are at the moment in terms of data, and I see in terms of consumption. Isn't it interesting that there's a statistic, isn't there? I don't know it off the top of my head, so I probably shouldn't introduce it. But the thing around people saying thank you to ChatGPT and how much energy that actually uses. Do you know it,
A
or
glass of water every time, apparently.
that's it? Yeah, something like that. A glass of water every single time someone says thank you to ChatGPT. It's unbelievable. In terms of the consumption, that it's inevitable, it is unsustainable. My other hat though is that, and I hate to say it, is that I'm kind of stuck. Like we kind of don't really have a choice. And this is the difficulty, back to the original point that I made around organizations are using it anyway and they're plowing on with it, and we don't really have a choice. So I'm tired. But I do wonder if all this data needs storing, or if it's similar to my iPhone with its 29,000 photos. Much of them are like, no, hang on, let me take that another 20 times, and it's just duplicates of original data that just doesn't need to be there. And I do wonder if eventually we'll get to a point where we find a more efficient way to store data. And we also find a way to actually archive it in a way that we just get rid of it. There's so much junk, isn't there? None of us cleans out our computer. So imagine if we
A little
upload.
slightly paranoid we might need something later.
You know what? I don't even think I empty my mailbox. I'm one of those. I looked at my phone a couple of years ago and it was on, it got to like 98,000 emails unread. It used to come up on my iPhone. I'm one of those people. Um, so if you had all that data stored, the impact in terms of cost of that is massive, but actually it doesn't need to be there in the first place. We just haven't necessarily set up the processes to be able to do that. And I do think when this becomes it's obviously an issue now, but when it becomes a priority of an issue, I think there's going to be some means to tackle that.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting because I agree this is the route we're down, but it does have significant environmental impact. But we already knew that about technology and digitalization and data. It's just the scale of it at the moment. So all I would say to our audience is, if ESG or sustainability is a strategic priority for your business alongside AI or LLMs and technology, please just ask questions about the environmental impact. One of the things we need to look at from a sustainability perspective is the life cycle of products, activities, and services. So we know the technology is good. It's just what resources is it using and what wastes is it producing? And again, all these brilliant minds applying solutions to make that process more efficient will hopefully make it a more responsible product in the future. Great. I'm going to ask one more question, Peter, and then we'll put it to the rest of the audience because I can see we've had questions pinging throughout, which is very exciting. I
Cool.
suppose it's just a bit of a looking ahead perspective. So thinking about AI and human collaboration in the risk and regulatory sector. So if we look kind of, 5 years ahead from now, 2030, which is quite a critical deadline for a lot of sustainability priorities and challenges that we're facing at the moment. So if we look 5 years ahead, what role do you think AI will play in shaping a safer, more sustainable organization? And what human skills are going to become even more critical on this journey?
Gosh, that's a good question. Okay. I think AI, I heard this mentioned the other day. AI is like electricity. It's electricity, it's just a catalyst. And AI is going to be used to integrate into many other systems. So, for example, you'll have a kettle or a toaster, right? You wouldn't look at a kettle or a toaster and think, oh, well, that's the electric company make that. It's someone that's using the electricity to do something and make it a more efficient process. And that's why AI is like electricity. And just as AI is in Google Maps or Waze, when I get my car and I put it in, it knows what the traffic is going to be in the future based on whether it's a Friday afternoon. And all of that is based on AI, right? All of that is based on AI, and we use it every single day. LLMs at the moment are basically like it's like the back end. It's the back end of the website that you're not supposed to see. That's how I see ChatGPT. It's just lazy. They're just like, here's a box, do what you want with it, right? That system will be integrated into everything else that you do. And you won't even know it. You won't see it. You will open up your emails, and that, by the way, I feel like I'm talking about flying cars or something in the future. But you'll open up your emails, and it will have already written a response for you. And then we get to this point where it's like, well, would they have sent an email in the first place? Because they know that they're just going to get an automated response, or do they need to? And that'd be a nice
Mhm.
day, wouldn't it? Where we don't have to email each other, because actually the response will have already been sent back by the same business computer, right? So why would it need to? That information will be more accessible. Um,
Mhm.
I think the world will be pretty much the same, in that a car is pretty much the same. So if I go back to my car from 100 years ago, take like a Model T Ford, right? It's a car. It's got a steering wheel, it's got four tires, it's a car, it's got a seat, but it's completely different in every other way. It's completely conceivably different. So I don't think there's going to be this outrageous change. You're still going to go into a workplace, you're still going to have colleagues. But if you look at it in 5 years' time, just processes will be different. And I just mentioned one like email. Um, but I do think that we will have less ChatGPT, but ChatGPT will just be in the back end. It will be like an Amazon AWS. You're like, Amazon, don't they sell books and stuff online? No, no, it turns out they own a load of servers and they power most of your systems. right? You don't even know about it. So I think ChatGPT, Perplexity, and these systems, they will just power the systems in the back end, but you won't necessarily feel it. It won't be something that causes you any friction.
It's really interesting. And still people necessary along the way because we've got to take all this brilliant data interpretation and then still apply it to our jobs, which can sometimes be in very complex environments and still need humans to facilitate.
Do you know, I heard something the other day, and I know we're going to go to questions. It was about jobs. And the chap was saying, but yeah, but jobs change. He said, how do you mean? He's like, well, if I went to my granddad and said, I go to this place where they have lots of weights, and then this other guy tells me to lift weights, obviously I'm referring to a personal trainer, he'd go, oh my God, how much do they pay you to do that? It's like, no, I have to pay him. Hold on. So you go to a place where there's stuff and you just pick it up and someone tells you to do it and you give them money. So this is the whole point, that jobs are created as time goes, and some jobs go and some jobs have appeared. I don't think there's going to be anything that's like dramatic. There's nothing going to like suddenly turn off and all of a sudden everyone's going to go, oh my God, I need a job now. It's just going to change and evolve over many, many years.
Absolutely.
But hey,
And
what do
from
I
a, absolutely. And I think it is, the skills that we need now really are that kind of risk appetite, but common sense approach, and this kind of openness and adaptability and willingness to learn how we bring in these new technological options in a sustainable, ethical, and people-centric kind of way.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we've got some questions through. I'm just going to ask my colleague Amy whether
Yeah.
you're asking the questions or I am.
I am asking, I will try to read out those questions. So one of the question will be, when we refer to data quality, are we building the RUGs the first step? If I could explain what RUG stand for, is retriever augmented generation. I think that is to avoid the AI hallucination to build on the data that we have. So what is the understanding around this RUG thing, if Peter could explain?
So I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I'll do my best. So in terms of how do we build the data structure in the first place in terms of safety, I don't think we're there yet. There are a number of ways that we can do it though. There are a number of database tools that are available. We can use AI to assist us. We've just got to agree what taxonomy we're using. I think one approach to that is to use the ISO standards. And then ultimately, it would be a case of creating a very large data lake, or even like a knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph is what we use in Intuity. Um, and a knowledge graph, I'm going to explain this in a way that as I say, I'm not an AI guy, right? But my understanding of a knowledge graph is, if you take a two-dimensional graph with an X and Y axis, a knowledge graph is like that, except for it has infinite vectors. So vectors are three-dimensional, and it goes off in infinite directions, and vectors, and you can pick any point on any one of those vectors, or almost infinitely. So it's massive in terms of the data. But the benefit of the knowledge graph is that when the information is recalled, it's recalled accurately because it's gone in there accurately. So it only pulls out the data that's gone in there in exactly the format that it went in. And that's really important because then it doesn't have the randomization of language that the LLM does. So I think this is similar to your point in terms of, how do we get the data right in the first place? We have to agree the taxonomy, and then we have to agree storage locations. At the moment, we store data on a lot of legacy safety systems. A lot of those legacy safety systems, in fact, as part of here's an issue, right? If you go and get a safety system now, when you send it to your cybersecurity people and your infosec people and your legal people within your company, all they care about is where the data goes, and they will tie it down and lock it down in clause after clause after clause, as if these are the codes to launch a nuclear missile, not how Dave tripped over in the warehouse on some racking, right? Honestly, I pull my hair out with it. Now, the issue with that then is you can't do anything with it. You can't integrate with it. You can't share it. We can't API into it. And this is a real problem. To me, the data should be going into these systems and it should be shareable, right? So I have a system over here that looks at AI and CCTV, say. I have a system over here that stores our accidents and incidents. I have a system over here that helps me build our risk assessments. Why the hell can't they talk to each other? It just annoys me so much. That's what we need, those systems to be able to talk to each other. That would solve our problem. Standardized language, those systems talk to each other. We've solved 95% of our problem.
So without a good quality data, perhaps even with the AI agent would be much useless if we don't have a quality standard in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can stack AI. So you can take AI. So like, again, for example, what we do is we will use an ingestion tool. So when we drop a risk assessment into a system, we have an ingester that the guys in the office built. I say in the office, right? They're like the cast of the Big Bang Theory, right? They've all got like PhDs and double masters, super intelligent guys, but they build an ingester and that extracts the information that we want to out of the data. It anonymizes it. So if someone's left any personal information in there, it anonymizes that. Like that's absolutely critical for GDPR and information security and everything, right? And then it takes that and it puts that bit into the knowledge graph, and then we can recall that bit accurately. So what you can do is you can stack various AI tools together. You don't need one that does everything. And then at the very end, if you wanted to, you could bolt on an LLM as the final piece of the puzzle, right? And in that LLM, then it would allow you to free talk and go, tell me about this, right? Because that's the bit that everyone loves. But the LLM itself isn't the data. That's just the interface, if that makes sense.
I think just to feed into that as well, it's kind of the real world problems we have in the first place. It's these siloed systems and people not talking to each other and sharing challenges, which I'm sure, all safety, risk, and environmental professionals are all too used to. So there is, the system still needs to support this adoption. Very interesting. I think we've got time for one more question, please, Amy.
Yeah. Do you feel there will be a VHS versus Beta Max style competition between the big LLM?
Oh, say that one more time. Just the first bit, you mean? I got will there be some competition between the big LLMs?
It's VHS versus Beta Max.
Oh, VHS versus Betamax. Crikey, whoever's asked that question, you are showing your age, right? I'd have gone with like mini discs and MP3s, but you went full Betamax old school, right? So yeah, I'm too young. I don't even know what those are, to be honest. Do I think there will be? Do you know what you'll probably find is that just one will do one thing really well and another will do something else well. That would be it, in all honesty. And it won't. I don't think the value is in the LLM. I think the value is in the data and how the data is structured, if I'm going to be honest, because I don't think the LLM interface has actually got any value whatsoever. I think anyone could spin that up, right? Like Tama and I could probably sit here now on Replit and spin up our own LLM interface and we could call it whatever we want, but it's rubbish if the data in the back end is rubbish. So I think for me, there's two things. It's all about the data in the back end, and whatever the data is probably the real value of where the LLM is in the future. And what you'll find is that different LLMs will really be used for different things. Would you agree, Tama?
I would. I must say, I really enjoyed that question. I think
Cool,
it's great. But again, it speaks to a point, we have actually seen this before, new technologies coming into existence, old technologies ceasing to exist. The marketplace will balance itself out. But I think because we're in this transitionary period, it is the opportunity for safety professionals to really forge how these interact with us and the type of information that we are able to get out of them in the future to inform best practice on a day-to-day kind of operational level. Well, this has been fabulous. I've really enjoyed this. I'm just going to ask Peter, do you have any kind of closing thoughts, comments, or observations for our audience? Anything you think they could benefit from a bit more research after this session?
Do you know, every single time I do any presentation, there will be people that go, I'm going to wait and see what happens, right? And I just got a couple of things to this. Years and years ago, do you remember when Bitcoin first launched, you had to mine it? Do you remember that process where people like mined Bitcoin? I remember hearing about it. I was in the cops then, and someone said to me, have you heard about this Bitcoin thing? And I went, no, never heard of it. They were like, oh, I've heard someone sitting there mining Bitcoin. I might chuck a couple of grand into it to see what happens, right? Oh my God, if I'd have followed that advice. Like just, if I hadn't have missed the boat and followed that advice. And then all the way through, everyone was like, I think it's still going up, you know, do you want to put some money into it? I'm like, no, I'll be all right. And now I don't know what it's worth now. It's outrageous in terms of the value. And we always do this because there's the fear. And we did the same thing with contactless and Apple Pay. You know, the fear around Apple Pay. And it's like, oh, someone's going to be on your, when we had contactless, someone's going to be on the train and they'll rub up against you with a card reader. I mean, that's weird behavior anyway, you'd notice. You know, and then, you know, we have all this fear around new technology, but the thing is the people that are creating the technology, they will iron this out. Like the guardrails will be put in place, the legislation, the rules will shift either side, but ultimately, regardless, the technology is still going to drive forward. For me, it's just get on board before it's too late. That's what I would say.
Yes, I would agree. And where can people find you, Peter, if they'd like to follow up after this?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Peter Thomas, MSc. Sorry, I'm not trying to brag. It's just Peter Thomas is the most common name in the world. I have two first names. So Peter Thomas, MSc on LinkedIn. Yeah, or go to intuity.io, which is our website.
That's brilliant. Peter, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I have really enjoyed this conversation. This is our second in-depth, and I feel probably a few more to come afterwards. But really great stuff. Thank you, Emi, for fielding the questions, and thank you to IRSM for hosting this webinar. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all.